Hey, what's up, fam? Shabbat Shalom. It is Saturday afternoon, maybe 3 p.m. Eastern time as I'm recording this. This is your longer Parsha summary. Earlier I put up less than a minute. Can you believe that? A less than a minute video from me. I've never heard of such a thing that I could produce a video in less than a minute. Not my usual MO, but this one's going to be longer because I'm going to do a full summary. Not a full summary, but at least a summary of kind of the bullet points, the main points that I tried to hit in my Parsha summary that I published today. I think that what we have here in this Parsha in particular, to those that may be tuned in and are interested in what I'm talking about, the Torah, the first 5 books of the Christian Old Testament, the T and Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, these 5 books, there's a annual reading cycle where all of that material, each of those 5 books are portioned out into little chunks, and you just read those weekly throughout the year. That's what the portion is of the Parsha, Parshat. So this is Parsha Ki Teitzei. This is in the book of Deuteronomy. It just moves stepwise through Torah, so you stay in the books for a long time until you finish them. And we're in Deuteronomy, the last book of the Torah. This will set up the introduction to Joshua, the Deuteronomistic history. I don't want to get too far afield from what I want to make this video about, which is this week's Parsha. Now, here's the tension that I try to raise. There is, I think, no doubt that the laws that are given in the Parsha that we read this week, and it definitely is light on narrative and heavy on instruction. There are 72 different commandments, laws, mitzvot, that are given in the Parsha that we read. So in a couple of chapters, few chapters, we're given 72 different instructions if you count carefully and tediously, as we are known to do. So that instruction has a lot to do with human dignity, with, I think, what we would just call broadly social justice. It absolutely, without a doubt, is there. All sorts of things, like examples are if an enslaved person who has fled from the enslaver shows up in your encampment, in your city, in your area, you are not to return them to the enslaver. So that's a good example. Another example, after public execution, you are not permitted to display the body at the city gates, which is a thing that was done as a deterrence measure to intimidate and show political force over your enemies, etc. But out of respect for the deceased, there's a prohibition against that practice for respect for the dead body. So there are several. You may gather from your neighbor's fields. If you are food insecure, you can gather from your neighbor's fields and vineyards. Now, it says that you're not allowed to fill up a container. You can't fill a vessel from your neighbor's field, but you are allowed to eat freely from your neighbor's field. So this would help those who are food insecure. There are rules having to do with criminal negligence, to avoid criminal negligence, for example. And so these values that are represented in these laws do seem to be concerned principally with what I think we would call social justice, combating wealth inequality, combating food insecurity, introducing certain rules around the enslavement of people that might move in the direction of more human dignity. But it's extremely problematic as well. And this is what I try to call out, is that, is this like incrementalism? Is this like trying to introduce some humanity within within otherwise human atrocities? This is a question that I raise, right? Is that, should we be satisfied? Should we call this justice-centered material when at the core there continue to be the perpetuation of unjust systems? And the use case, or the test case, that I really use throughout the post has to do with the opening scene, the opening case. So if a soldier in battle finds a beautiful woman who that soldier desires, who I think we can here use the masculine pronoun he, because likely a soldier going into battle by the patriarchal society of the time is going to be a he, likely, most likely. Not always. It's not always the case, because there are many women heroines who are featured within the Tanakh. But here in Torah, likely he is a safe pronoun to use. But if a soldier desires a beautiful woman, he may take her captive. It's in the text. You can read it. It opens the whole thing. Ki Teitzei. It opens it. And then he may make that woman his wife, which means to, and content warning, but to have forcible intercourse with this woman. Now, there's the guidance that's offered is that woman is allowed 1 month to mourn her mother and father. So that introduces a component of human dignity. It treats that woman like a person, not merely a captive, right? Not merely someone who you've kidnapped and taken, but it treats that woman with human dignity by some allowance for mourning. But wouldn't it be more just, right, to say, well, don't take captives, period? So we're still perpetuating these systems. And what do we do with that? And I think this is an important thing to pick up on because it really is an apologetic move. And this happens a lot where we like, well, does the Bible endorse the enslavement of other people? Does the Bible endorse chattel slavery, for example? And it most certainly does. Authorizes it and endorses it at times. So it's really an apologetic tactic to say, oh, well, yes, but look at how much more humane this system is in this legislative code than other practices in ancient Southwest Asia or something like this, right? It's kind of an apologetic technique to say, oh, sure, yes, the enslavement of other people is bad, but look at the, humanity, the humaneness of it that's introduced here within the biblical literature. I think that's, we should be suspect of that move because we're still operating within an otherwise fundamentally unjust system. So what I do in the Parsha this week is I try to make us uncomfortable. I try to introduce this discomfort. I try to introduce this tension because happy enough we would be to say, oh, look at these justice-centered rules, legislation, commandments, mitzvot, instruction, whatever. Look at how justice-centered it is. Look at how concerned with social justice it is. And I don't disagree with that. If you read a plain reading of the text, there does seem to be a concern with social welfare generally. And we should tell ourselves that, remind ourselves of that, root ourselves in that reality, that there's a deep concern with social justice, tikkun olam, repairing the world, etc. Tzedek tirdof, justice such as I will pursue. It just is the case that Torah is concerned with justice. And I also think we should feel the discomfort of these fundamentally unjust systems that continue to be perpetuated in the text, even if there is the introduction of some human dignity. And I think there's a move that might say, oh, well, this is an incremental process, building a bridge to a more just world or something like this. But in order to make that move, you have to presuppose some teleological aim in the text. And if you presuppose a teleological or goal-directed aim within the literature, then you have to further impose upon the text some consistent perspective that speaks throughout the text. And it just doesn't, right? Even by the documentary hypothesis, right? The four major source traditions of the Yahwist, the Elohist, the Deuteronomistic historian, the priestly source, those four sources, even if you say there's a single perspective in each of the sources, those are still four sources, right? So we can't infer a teleological aim that says, oh, well, all of this is incrementally moving us away from these unjust systems toward a more just world. It's just unfolding over time. But that presupposes and imposes a later worldview back onto the text. So I don't think we can make that move. So I'll wrap it up here because I said 6 minutes and I've gone 8. But that's what I tried to raise in my commentary this week, is to affirm, yeah, there's some justice-centered material here, but we're still operating under wholly unjust systems of human rights violations and atrocities. And so what do you do with that material? That's what I try to talk about. And I invite you into the dialogue there, man, to think more about how we make sense of that, how we hold on to the justice-centered nature of the text while also wrestling with the perpetuation of unjust systems. So that's what I did with Parsha Ki Teitzei. You can find it at Hitzonim because you know where links are. Okay. Really, Shabbat Shalom. Love, peace, justice to everybody.